I'm Bill O'Connor, the Executive Vice President of the Naval Academy Foundation. Admiral Carter will often mention the distinct mission of the Naval Academy. Like our sister academies, we train leaders for command of our armed forces. Unlike our sister academies, however, we also educate and train leaders for citizenship and government. In other words, we train leaders for a lifetime of service and leadership. A big effort for the Alumni Association and Foundation is to make sure that we acknowledge and celebrate the civilian accomplishments of our graduates as well as the military accomplishments. And I think that the new Alumni Center building that you might have seen in the interactives last night are going to be a major step forward for us to tell the story of the great accomplishments of our graduates in business and government as well as military. Today we're very fortunate to have a distinctive panel of captains of industry, some of our best and brightest leaders through a cross-section of businesses in the United States. And I'm honored today to have the privilege to introduce the moderator of the panel, Greer Olsen Lautrup. Greer is a graduate of the Naval Academy class in 1985. She's also a graduate of the University of Virginia Law School. She is currently a partner practicing food and drug law at the DC office of international law firm Sidley Austin LLP. Her practice focuses on assisting U.S. pharmaceutical and international companies in complying with the technical regulations that govern the manufacture of pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Greer has been working with pharma and device companies throughout the world, including in China, Japan, India, Europe, and Australia. Prior to attending law school, Greer served for 8 years as a naval intelligence officer. Her assignments included intelligence analyst and briefer for Secretary of Defense Richard Cheney, for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Colin Powell, and the DIA Director General James Clapper, as well as Squadron Intelligence Officer for VP 26. So I'd ask you all to join me in welcoming Greer Lautrup, who will introduce the rest of the panel.
Good morning. Call to Serve, Daring to Lead is not just the title of our campaign, but it's also how we live our lives here at USNA, in the military, and beyond. For those who attended yesterday's excellent panel, like my classmate, Admiral Cindy Tabode, I was first called to service by my parents, most significantly my father, who was a World War II Marine and then a career Air Force officer. And like Matisse Wright, I first became interested in the Naval Academy when I saw the first class of women graduate in 1980. And it went from I could do that to I want to do that. During my time in the military, which I really enjoyed, I, like my fellow panelists here, came to the realization that I wanted to do something else. So I essentially quit my job, sold my home, went into debt, and went to law school. Those same parents thought I was crazy, but it worked out. I really enjoyed what I do, and I am thankful to both my time here at the Academy and my time in the military, because I know it's made me a better lawyer, not just practicing law, but really in mentoring and working with the junior lawyers, which is part of our responsibility. But you're not here to hear from me, you're here to listen to our panel. So I wanted very briefly to introduce each of them. I could spend the entire hour going through their accomplishments, but then you wouldn't be able to hear from them. But I do want to at least tell you a little bit about each of them. Immediately to my left is Mike Pettis from the class of 1982. Mike is the CEO of Huntington Ingalls Industries, which is America's largest military shipbuilding company. Huntington Ingalls has built more than 70% of the Navy's combatants, and that includes all the nuclear carriers. It builds nuclear submarines as well as surface combatants. And Mike and his wife are also very active in philanthropy, including supporting a summer camp for low-income middle schoolers. Next to him is JoAnna Sohovich from the class of '93. She is the CEO of the Chamberlain Group, which makes high technology products for commercial and residential use, things you probably have heard of, such as the LiftMaster. Before joining the Chamberlain Group, she was a president at Honeywell and at Stanley Black & Decker, where she served as the global president of their $1.6 billion Stanley Engineering Fastening Group. Next to her is Scott Wine. He is the chairman and CEO of Polaris Industries. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, they make really cool stuff like ATVs, snowmobiles, and motorcycles, based in Minnesota. And prior to that, he was an executive with companies such as United Technologies, Danaher, and Allied Signal. And finally, David Robinson probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. Class of 1987, obviously a terrific basketball player here at the Naval Academy. I was privileged to be able to watch him. He went on to a spectacular career with the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, including national championships, Olympic gold medals, and culminating with induction into the college and NBA Halls of Fame. Has also been extremely active in his community and philanthropy, including founding the Carver Academy, which is a nonprofit charter school for underprivileged students. So great group of folks here, and what's most impressive to me is, with the exception of Mike, they're all younger than I am and have accomplished so much. And Mike only by a couple of years. So I wanted to talk, first of all, about the transition from the military to the civilian world, and I thought I would start with our most recent, I guess, transitioners, JoAnna and Scott. So JoAnna, what did you find the most difficult challenge to overcome when we're transitioning from the military to the corporate world?
In the military, as you all know, you have a detailer, and they tell you what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and when you're going to show up. And when I first started interviewing for my very first job, it was with Allied Signal, later became Honeywell. I didn't know how I was going to pick the job. They brought in probably 50 service academy graduates and did an entire junior military officer rotation. And in the end, the HR person said, "Which job do you want?" And I had no idea how to pick. I thought maybe I could look at the salaries and pick the one that paid the most. But they said, they told me that they were going to recommend my salary regardless of which job I chose. So for that first time, I called my dad and asked him which one I should pick. And then after that, I really had to figure out what I wanted to do. One of the greatest learnings, and something that I try to pass on to others, is that you don't have to do what you're good at. There were a lot of things that I was good at, but I had to figure out, what did I want to do, and how did I accumulate the necessary experience to be qualified for those roles. And that's a confusing transition for a junior military officer when what you want to do is not necessarily aligned with the needs of the Navy.
Scott, what about?
I was very fortunate. I got my MBA while I was working for General Power in this executive dining room, and I thought I wanted to go into investment banking. And fortunately, Dan and Danielle at the Carlyle Group told me that I wouldn't be very good at it, so I should try something else. And so I ended up working on a factory floor for Allied Signal. And the thing that was most difficult for me was that my peer group weren't very good leaders. They didn't understand, they'd kind of come up, but they'd never had leadership training. So figuring out how to lead from the side and help them develop as leaders without coming in as condescending was really the hardest part, because they were good people, but just didn't understand how to hold people accountable. They didn't understand the discipline required to get consistent results. So that was really a good opportunity for me to learn, and it was thankful for the experiences I'd gotten here.
Perfect. David, I know you had sort of a different career than many of the others. How did you see your experiences at the Naval Academy and how that impacted your world, both as a basketball player and working with a lot of athletes, and now working in philanthropy and other corporate endeavors?
Yeah, you would think it would be very different, but it wasn't. Truthfully, it's similar to what you say. You walk into a locker room, and there's really no leadership. And I was drafted to the worst team, and one of the worst teams in the league. So we needed leadership. So walking into that locker room, the experience coming from here, having the discipline, having the sense of being some part of something greater than yourself, that just wasn't there. And so my initial kind of thought process was, bring that to this locker room. Help get these guys together, get us all on the same page, and then how do we work throughout an organization that, I'm kind of not necessarily the top guy on the totem pole. We've got, team management, we've got the owner, and now we've got to get everybody on the same page. So using a lot of that discipline and that structure, kind of that sense of how do we get everybody together that I learned here really worked well there. I was surprised how undisciplined most guys were. You think you're making a lot of money, man. We're going out, we're playing basketball. This is a great job. And guys aren't disciplined enough to train themselves. They come to training camp out of shape. During the season, just having enough discipline to be prepared for practice day in and day out was just not there. And so fortunately, I was able to provide some of that leadership, and a few other things came together, and we've had good success for the last 25 years or so.
And what about since your time, since you left the NBA?
Yeah, no, I've had several transitions in my career. So going to basketball was a lot of fun, and then went from basketball to philanthropy, starting to build schools. We've built schools. I started the schools because my son, when I was looking for private schools for my sons, I looked to the public schools, I looked to the private schools, and I said, what do I want to do for my boys? Very, very expensive to send them to private school. What about people who can't afford private school? So we started these schools in inner city San Antonio, where we could get these kids ready for college. And so we started one school with 60 kids, and we've grown now, and we have 78 schools across Texas and Louisiana, 44,000 kids. And for the last 14 years, we've sent every single child who graduated to college.
In your experience in the military and the academy, how did that affect what you do, and especially how you review corporate responsibility?
Yeah, so I think to echo a little bit of what's been said here, I think for me, when I first left the active Navy, I at that moment realized what a special place in terms of the people in the Navy, the caliber, the quality, the screening process, the crew that I served with, those folks were, if you think about what it takes to be a machinist mate on a nuclear submarine, that's a little bit of a cream of the crop kind of talent. And then you move into an organization where you have, and today we have 40,000 people across the world. They are also the cream of the crop, which I had to kind of do a little bit of a mental adjustment about, okay, I had a self-selecting kind of filter there of talent. Now I have to be in a place where that lesson of have great people, don't pick great people, but have great people, and make sure you find ways to allow everyone to do their best work, which I learned here. But to be able to do that in an organization, and how you get everybody empowered in the organization to do well, when they are not going to go through that filter process of everybody goes to boot camp, everybody goes through a rating system, everybody's got to go through a qualification system. That's an interesting dichotomy from where we came from. My view today is that our company, while you talked about the ships we build, what we really do is we create workforce. Nobody shows up at our gate with a degree in shipbuilding. We train welders, we train electricians, we train engineers, and we work with schools to get kids that be interested in our program. Setting a standard for 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you go into a local high school near one of our schools, and the teacher might say, you need to pass my class so that you don't have to work in that shipyard. Today, what we did is we brought the teachers in and we let them work for a little bit. Now they say, if you have any hope at all of working in those shipyards, you have to pass my class. And so, and all of that is about making sure that you give your people a chance to do their very best work.
That actually brings up something else I want to talk about, which is hiring. And you talked about trying to get good people. I guess I would ask JoAnna, when you're looking to hire someone into your company, what sorts of things are most impressive to you? And especially at the more senior levels.
I look for energy and enthusiasm and curiosity. I think we all do. But one of the things that just continues to surprise me is candidates who show up who know very little about my company and what we do and what our technology is and how we can make a difference. I'm impressed when somebody has done their homework, they understand our company, they understand what our technology is, they have ideas about new things we can do and new adjacencies that we can move into, and they come to the table. I see the same thing with people who ask us about the Naval Academy. Usually it's their parents asking us to talk to their kids about the Naval Academy, but they have no idea what it might be. They just think it might be a good place to go. And so people who've done their homework and have their own thoughts and ideas and their own motivation and feel like they can bring something to the company are always ones who stand out.
And David, you look at folks to do a little bit of different type of work to help with your activities. What sorts of things are you looking for?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. I mean, I'm a big character guy. I love people who have passion and purpose. And so, to me, you can always learn to do whatever it is we need to do. My business is private equity, so we buy office, hotel, multifamily around the country. And so I do need people who can actually underwrite a deal. That's important. But my oldest son just started working for me, and I just love his passion. He loves people. He's an incredible networker. To me, passion is what it's all about. If they understand the bigger picture and they understand kind of all the pieces fit together, right? My family is just as important as my job. And my job is just as important as what we do in the community, right? So we're going to do great work, but that work is only good if it complements what we're doing in the communities where we're investing. And so I just like those balanced people that have a good perspective all around, and they're not just there. I mean, the finance world, the finance world, it can get kind of edgy. People can get greedy and selfish, and there's a lot of money there. But I like when people aren't driven by the money.
Scott, different views or the same?
A little bit different in that, I think it's a privilege to hire people. You don't get that privilege in the Navy, so you have to form your own team. So I really value critical thinking skills, and unfortunately, sometimes lawyers have some of the better critical thinking skills. But I think that's really important. And then I always look for a track record of getting results, and I say getting results the right way. I don't want people to tell me how they're going to do something. Tell me what you've done and why you did it that way. We actually send all of our senior leadership team through a 4-hour industrial psychologist interview, and we get a detailed report, and we balance that up with what we've seen in the interviews. So we take it very seriously, and I'm thankful to have a very strong leadership team because of it.
So Mike, a somewhat loaded question, and you can't say all of the above. Which would you say is the most important to your organization? The mission, your core values, or your vision? Obviously all are important, but which do you think is the most important?
Yeah, that's not even a hard question. I mean, it starts with values. Now we are privileged to be building platforms that are going to go out and make history for 50 years. And so, it's not hard to be part of the team. No single person has ever built a ship. It is a team sport and a team activity. And it is pretty exciting, and you get a lot of purpose and sense of mission when you see the ship get manned by the sailors. It comes to life under your hands. And then you see it on CNN doing important things. And there's a lot of mission and purpose around making sure that all of our sailors never go into a fair fight. And all of that we almost take for granted because we spend so much time on values and so much energy on values. I mentioned 40,000 people. The thing that I worry about, I don't worry about a quality issue in my yard. We know how to deal with that. I don't worry about an absentee issue in my yard. We know how to deal with that. What I worry about is that somebody somewhere on the planet in our name is going to feel the pressure to do something wrong. They're going to have the opportunity to do something wrong, and they're going to be able to rationalize doing something wrong. And we're going to have to go deal with that. And as far as I'm concerned, if you don't get that right, if you ever screw that up, it doesn't matter how many ships you build, you're going to have an incredibly hard problem for your leadership team to deal with. And you can't go a week now without picking up a paper and reading about a company that has lost its way. And I talk to business schools a lot about, who are your heroes? What I loved about being here at Annapolis, and I was here at a time when the POWs had come back and were on the faculty, there was never any question about who our heroes were. We knew who our heroes were. But when you go into business schools and you start seeing some of the people that they will advertise are their heroes, are the people that made a lot of money, however they made it, you kind of step back and you can see it's not a long walk to go from that sort of foundation to being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or in a hearing in some public forum. And so that to me is why values are the most important thing that leaders have to work on, and you have to work on them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So JoAnna, do you have the same views? And if so, what do you do to follow up on what Mike said to inculcate values in your employees? If that's your view.
It is. I run a family-owned company, and the family gave me their 8 values when they hired me, and they interviewed for values and leadership, and we made sure that my values were aligned to theirs. I made sure that my values were aligned to theirs because I knew what it was like to work in a publicly owned company. I knew what the rules were. I did not know what the rules were working for a family-owned company, and I was worried that if my values didn't align to theirs, it wouldn't be a good match. But once I was given the values, I and my leadership team got together for about a 6-month period, and then we created the vision, the mission, the strategy, the culture, and the behaviors. And what I love about working for this company is that so many times in my past, people were rewarded for the results that they drove, but it didn't matter if they left bodies in the wake. And that would always frustrate me. Now, not only am I given permission, I'm expected to lead in a way that we reward results and behaviors. We care about what people did, but also how they did them. And so one of the first things that I did when I got there with the full permission and charter is we held a values breakout. We had our top 80 leaders get together, and we broke them up in groups of 10 because there's eight values, and we said, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we be emphasizing more? And then we brought all of the top leaders back together, and we had a debrief about what we were doing well, but where we maybe had lost our way. Now I can tell you, when I first started, people would come up to me and they'd talk about our 10 values, and I said, well, I'm new here, but even I know there's only 8. Now our employees can list all of our values. They know what they are. And we have discussions about making money, and we have discussions about our technology, and it really makes me feel good when people say, well, we could do this with our internet data, but that's in conflict with our values. We don't sell our customers data. And when they start to talk about that and they are able to link strategy to our values, that's when I feel that we're making an impact.
So I guess, Scott, to continue this line, how and to jump off where JoAnna was, how do you and your company balance the need to have the bottom line? Because obviously, if you're a CEO, I think Dan Ackerson yesterday, you have a mission every quarter, which is to make profits. How do you balance that with the core values, trying to maintain those in your company?
Well, I mean, I'm an unapologetic capitalist. I ran a business in Germany, and they actually made T-shirts with my picture on it and said "capitalist pig," and I took it with pride. I mean, I think it's important that we do balance that. But I think JoAnna said it the correct way. You've got to get results the right way. There can never be a compromise. And so our guiding principles, we reinforce them every leadership meeting we have. It's simple. The best people, best team. We're always committed to having the right people. Safety and ethics always, and customer loyalty. And whatever we do, we say, we're going to go for the best possible results. I mean, my shareholders expect me, my board expects that from me, but we're always going to look to do it the right way. And I think the challenge is leaders, so often you have to make the right choice. And I think if you look at what we were taught here and then ultimately reinforced in the Navy, it's that ability to make the right choice even under pressure. And I think, I don't always get it right, and when we don't, you've also got to admit that you've got to change course. But I think having those guiding principles up front that everybody buys into and understands that we're not going to compromise. I had to let my chief operating officer go. He had done something wrong, and he asked me to forgive it. And I said, I'm not going to, every time I talk about safety, ethics, always, it's not except for you. And he was gone.
How would you say that what you learned here and what the midshipmen are learning here today has helped you inculcate values and balance values with profit at your company?
I think what one of the things that's so great about this place is it's hard. And they force you to be able to perform under pressure. And I think sometimes you could want to compromise to be able to achieve something. And that doesn't, it happens here where this is not a perfect institution. But I think by and large, most people, the vast, vast majority do it the right way. And I think, you know, learning how to do the right thing under pressure when it's not always easy was a very, very valuable lesson for me.
And David, I'm just curious, obviously we all see the sports headlines every day. The NBA is kind of a wild and crazy place at times. How did what you learned here help you there, and obviously in your private equity and other work now?
Yeah, and you know, I think I alluded to it earlier, just understanding that you're a part of something greater than yourself, really getting a sense of and what we do in sports is build teams. Right, so that became my expertise really over the years. How do I put these guys together? How do I put this guy in a position where he can succeed? So a lot of those things, you know, really do well in business. When I bring people in, I say, how do I put this guy in a position where he can succeed? Because, you know, as a leader, your job is to not just produce, but your job is to care about what that person cares about and help them get where they want to get. And so each person is kind of an individual arm, and you have to manage those arms. And so it was great in a locker room, had a small team. You know, I could get all my guys and make sure they knew I cared about each one of them. I wanted to put them, and if we succeeded as a team, each individual guy was going to go on, they're going to get a better contract, they're all going to do well, and we're going to do well as an organization. And so here we are, you know, 25 years later, you have an amazing culture, you know, probably one of the best, you know, franchises in all of sports. And so, you know, I've tried to translate building that culture now to, in business, building the right culture where these guys know that I care about them, they know I'm going to put them in a position where they can succeed, and they know I want the very best, I want what they want for themselves. And so that's how we try to build our teams.
And just because I'm curious, I know when I think your first Olympics, you were one, if not the youngest person on the team, and toward the end you were one of the more seasoned veterans. How, especially in the first time when you were like one of the youngest and you're playing with all these mega stars, not just your team, but these are people who weren't the worst in the league, they were the best. How did that go?
Have your eyes opened all the time and learn as much as you can. I mean, you know, playing on the dream team in '92 was unbelievable. I walk in and, you know, here's Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and you know, Michael Jordan. I mean, it's an amazing team. And I went to practice every day trying to just absorb as much as I could. We were not a championship team yet. We didn't know how to get to the highest level. You feel when you're close, right? You feel like, okay, we're doing well, but we've got to get over this hump. We've got to get better. And I didn't know how to do that, but being around those guys, you know, going into that weight room with Karl Malone, you know, one of the biggest, strongest guys in the league, 6'9", 265 or 270, but worked like an animal, and you could see why he was so great. Then you get to practice an hour early, and you know, Larry Bird's been there an hour already shooting shots, and you see these work ethics, you see all of these different things that make individuals great, and I try to incorporate what worked for me, and so, you know, that's what I try to put people in a position where they can kind of see what they need to excel.
So one question I'd like to ask all of you, just because I think it'd be fascinating, is essentially what an average day is like, or how you spent yesterday. What do you do in your average day at work, whatever that average day is? So I'd like start with you, other than go to meetings all day, which I...
Yeah, I'd really rather not think about yesterday. We had our earnings call yesterday morning. We followed our financials. We did our earnings call with all the analysts in Wall Street. Wall Street is trying to figure out how pension accounting works for defense companies. And all the defense companies have had really great quarters, only to have Wall Street go and dump the stocks. And so yesterday was a day full of that. We're also right now in the middle of heavy-duty negotiations with the Navy on whether how do we build the next 2 aircraft carriers, and how's the best way to save as much money for the taxpayers in doing that. And so that took up another big chunk of the day. And you know, but I would say that was just a day in the life. I think in general, I think that my general day is that you got to recognize you're on stage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People are listening to what you're saying. They're watching what you do. They're really trying to see if you are actually the person that you say you are. Because if you are not that person, and your actions will betray whether you are who you say you are. And the wider that gap is between who you say you are and who you betray you are, the wider that gap is, the less credibility you're going to have. And so a day in the life is make sure that you live up to the standards that you aspire to for your organization. Make sure that you're the leader that that organization deserves. I tell folks I have 40,000 bosses and I have 50 million shareholders. And so I have a lot of folks who have a lot of expectations, and living up to that every day and making sure that the words and the actions match is, that's a full-time job for me.
JoAnna?
So I'll start out by saying no day is ever the same. And I have a really good leadership team, and they take pride in getting as much stuff done without my intervention as possible. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not, but they try to take care of as much as they can. When I'm in town, there are two constants. One is I'm up at 4:10 so I can be at my 5 a.m. workout. And I learned, even in the Navy, it didn't matter if I was up for the mid-watch and I was only going to get a couple hours of sleep. If I went for a run, my day was so much better. One hour of running trumped 1 hour of sleep every single time when I had a stressful day, and I still use that today. The other thing that I love doing when I'm in town is I try to go down to the cafeteria and just sit down at one of the tables and talk with the employees. And again, I can trace that back to being a division officer and management by walking around. Just getting to know people, hearing what they have to say, hearing their ideas, finding out what they're worried about. And it's a great way to take a pulse in the organization. And then the rest of the time, it's angry lawyers, complaining customers, airplanes, things like that, the glamorous stuff, eating over trash cans in airports. But really, the grounding comes from spending time with customers, spending time with employees, spending time with the suppliers that make you successful, and then trying to manage my family life, my health, my values, and the contributions that I like to make to the community.
Follow that? No, I mean, it's the same thing. I'll just give you Tuesday and Wednesday before I got here. Tuesday morning, I always get up early, get a workout, and a 7 o'clock staff meeting. And our staff meetings are full contact sports. I mean, I don't ever think I'm the smartest person in the room, and I always want to make sure we tackle the hard issues and do that. I had 2 hours to get some work done because there'd been a board meeting the following week, so my calendar was blocked. And then we drove 50 miles up to our research and development facility, and I spent the entire afternoon on Tuesday. We have our military vehicles in the ultralight vehicle category. We have 100% market share with the military. And so it's a lot of really cool products.